21. Charms class. Suitable to be a teacher? The Charms classroom fills as the bell approaches. Ravenclaw, true to its reputation, is the quietest house. Most of the young eagles sit patiently with their textbooks open, heads bent in concentration, only the occasional hushed whisper between them. Hufflepuff shares the lesson today, and the Badgers, seeing how subdued everyone else is, are obedient and restrained, faces bright with the sort of eager anticipation Charms tends to inspire. At Hogwarts, classes are usually taught to two houses at once. The pairings rotate randomly. Students only learn which house they'll be grouped with a day or so in advance from their schedules. The school says the system encourages cross-house friendships. Lucien is less convinced. Each house has its own temperament, and some combinations spark trouble. Gryffindor and Slytherin, for example, have a knack for arguing until someone wanders toward a duel. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff are steadier. One loves knowledge, the other values peace, so the atmosphere is calm and the pairings rarely cause problems. A few minutes before class, Terry arrives, slightly out of breath, and collapses into the seat beside Lucien. "Those stairs in this place are ridiculous," he pants. "Some of them move on a schedule, some you have to stand on and jump 3 times. And the school alarm is terrifying," he adds. "When it went off, I sat bolt upright." Lucien glances at the clock. 10 minutes to start. He turns his head and says softly, "Maybe the school is just worried about students being late." Terry scratches his head. "Is that so? Then I suppose the school really does care about us." The bell rings. Professor Phileas Flitwick arrives on time, perched on a stack of books just to reach the podium. In a high, cheerful voice, he takes the register and launches into his introduction. "You may already know me. I am Phileas Flitwick, head of Ravenclaw and your Charms teacher for first year. Charms is one of the foundations of magic. Today we will focus on practical, commonly used spells, beginning with the levitation charm." He taps his wand and the podium lifts into the air without wobbling. "And the color-changing charm." The wood gleams and in an instant turns a dazzling gold, drawing a ripple of impressed murmurs from the class. "All right, take out your wands. Today, we will practice the wand-lighting charm. Incantation, Lumos." Lucien mouths the word under his breath. Lumos. A steady, soft orb of light blooms at his wand tip. The spell is basic. He has long since mastered it. He tweaks the flow of his magic, and the orb shifts from white to blue, then detaches and floats once around his head. "Mr. Grafton, well done." Professor Flitwick hurries over. "That's a variant application of Lumos. 3 points to Ravenclaw." Lucien's display prompts others to try harder. Terry fumbles with his wand, chanting in bursts. White light flashes from his tip, but dies away instantly. Lucien notices the brightness is good, but the light is unstable. He leans over and quietly gives a few tips. "Imagine a candle flame," he says. "Keep the wand movement within half a hand's distance. The force should be like lifting an egg. Gentle. Don't rush the incantation. Speak it at a normal pace." Terry tries again, concentrating. The light steadies, brighter and more persistent than before. "I did it!" he exclaims, and only stops waving his wand when he spots Professor Flitwick watching and tucks it away. One by one, the others adopt Lucien's method. Orbs of light begin to hover around the room, and before long, that corner is the brightest spot in the classroom. Flitwick watches with a growing smile. He had already been paying attention to Lucien after a prior conversation with Professor McGonagall, but seeing Lucien not only cast an inventive variant of Lumos, but also explain and help others produce it clearly surprises him in the best way. Flitwick believes a true mastery of magic shows itself not only in performance, but in the ability to articulate the process so others can reproduce it. Many talented students can perform a spell and never explain how. Lucien, however, breaks the skill down into teachable steps and patiently guides his classmates, an unmistakable sign of someone with a teacher's instinct. Flitwick can't help but murmur to himself, perhaps he would make a fine teacher. Class ends on a high note. Flitwick awards Ravenclaw 2 extra points, explicitly citing Lucien's help. As the students file out, Lucien approaches the podium. "Professor Flitwick, I have some questions about charms. May I consult you?" "Of course," Flitwick replies with a smile. "Do you have another class now?" "No, Professor." He hops down from his stack of books and gestures toward the door. "Then come with me to my office." 22. The addition of the undetectable extension, a small beginning. Professor Flitwick's office sat just off the charms classroom. Like many rooms at Hogwarts, it was arranged for convenience, allowing professors to step straight from their offices into class without navigating the castle's ever-shifting staircases. Lucien and Flitwick crossed a few paces and sat opposite each other at the table. A teapot hovered, poured itself, and filled the cups before them. Lucien blew on his and took a small sip. "Fortnum and Mason, this is excellent." Flitwick waved a hand and the desk drawer opened itself. Tiny pocket cakes tumbled out of a tin and landed, bouncing, on a tiered stand. Lucien remembered Cho's comment. Professor Flitwick was particularly kind. The senior had said the dean would even make little cakes do a cowboy dance for a student who came in feeling down. No wonder Flitwick was so beloved, learned, skilled at teaching, and attentive to his students. "Mr. Grafton, what would you like to ask?" Flitwick prompted. "You can call me Lucien," he replied. "It's about the undetectable extension charm. I have some questions." Flitwick arched an eyebrow. This was hardly an elementary topic to open with, but he answered gently. "Are you interested in learning it?" Lucien surprised him. "I've already learned the undetectable extension charm, Professor. What I want to know is how to apply other enchantments, like a warming charm, a waterproofing charm, or a cleaning charm, to an object that's been given an undetectable extension, and how an undetectably extended container can hold living creatures." To convince Flitwick swiftly, Lucien picked up his teacup, flicked his wand, and murmured, "Spatium extender." Complex patterns rippled inside the cup's inner wall, then expanded and folded away. Lucien set it down and levitated the teapot to pour. Flitwick watched without blinking as the tea streamed and the cup never overflowed. Not until the last drop fell did a ripple cross the surface, and Flitwick look up, astonished. The undetectable extension charm was usually reserved for NEWT-level students, and most failed to master it. Yet here, before him, sat a first-year, no, a boy who'd had only one class, who had just cast it. Flitwick's praise came haltingly. Lucien's version wasn't flawless. There was room for refinement, but it worked. He took a shaky sip of his tea to steady himself, then refilled the pot with a discreet wave that sent fresh leaves and hot water into it. "Your idea is entirely feasible," he said at last, "and there's no rule against learning this at school." "I'm glad," Lucien said. "Can you show me how to attach other spells to an extended object?" Flitwick obliged. He cast an undetectable extension charm on another empty cup and explained, "Unlike the simple layering of charms, the extension alters the usable space. When you attach other enchantments, you must consider the points and layers where their effects manifest." Lucien listened closely, imitated the motions, and practiced. The more Flitwick taught, the more surprised he became. Lucien progressed with alarming speed. He already knew common charms. For unfamiliar spells, a single demonstration or a brief explanation was often enough for him to cast them correctly after one or two tries. His proficiency improved rapidly with repetition. As he worked, Lucien's system panel updated. Loan, waterproofing charm. Proficient. Task, cast waterproofing charm 5 times. Loan, cleaning charm. Proficient. Task, cast cleaning charm 5 times. Loan completed. Daily loans were the cheapest and simplest way to pick up spells, their rewards modest but sufficient to get him started, and their tasks were straightforward repetition. He could even customize which spells the daily loans taught him, which made them more useful than the broader weekly, monthly, or yearly loans. After they finished the basic prep, Flitwick moved on to more specific techniques and precautions for binding charms to extended space. Lucien's pace slowed somewhat as the lessons grew subtler. He checked his system for any weekly or monthly loans that might help, but they were either too general or only touched the topic superficially. The system wasn't omniscient. Self-study and practice still mattered. By the time they finished, Lucien had successfully attached warming, heating, and waterproofing charms to the demonstration cup. What had been an ordinary teacup could now automatically regulate the tea's temperature, keeping it pleasantly warm without ever feeling too hot to hold, and resist external temperature changes. In Lucien's former life, similar functions would have been handled by technology. Here, though, he had made them with magic, creating from scratch a small marvel by hand. It was a distinct pleasure to see knowledge turned into power. A teacup was only the beginning. In this world of magic, he would learn more, master more, and create more. 23. Containing magical creatures? Two old men reconcile their accounts. Beside the desk in Professor Flitwick's office, the warm aroma of black tea and the sweet scent of pastries filled the air. Seeing Lucien complete the undetectable extension charm on his own, Flitwick nodded with satisfaction. "Well done, Lucien." Lucien looked up from his teacup and replied sincerely, "Professor, thank you for your patient guidance." Flitwick chuckled and pointed to the pastry stand. "Have something to eat first. Take a break." Lucien picked up a small pink cake and nibbled it gracefully. Flitwick then asked, "Lucien, regarding using an undetectable extension charm on an object to contain living creatures, what conditions do you think need to be met?" Lucien swallowed the last bite, thought for a moment, and answered, "Firstly, you have to ensure a suitable living environment, climate, food, water. Secondly, the stability of the space. There can't be sudden spatial contractions or collapses. But beyond that, I haven't thought of anything else for now." Flitwick nodded approvingly. "You've covered it thoroughly. Actually, there's another issue if you're containing different species. If their environmental needs differ greatly, you'll need separate spaces, and that brings in more complex problems of spatial folding." Lucien grew thoughtful. Compared to simply applying an undetectable extension charm to an object, creating an item capable of housing living creatures was a much greater challenge. It required knowledge and magical skill far beyond his current ability. Flitwick added regretfully, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with an undetectable extension charm for containing living creatures. This technique is closer to a complex magical array. In that regard, only the Scamander family has researched it in depth." At the name, Lucien looked up. "Scamander?" "As in Newt Scamander, the author of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them." "Yes," Flitwick said, "the author of the worldwide bestseller." Lucien immediately remembered the suitcase from the film he'd seen in his previous life. Layers of small worlds inside, each a distinct environment, home to many fantastic beasts. A little paradise. "It's a pity," he said. "If it had been a few years earlier, we might have contacted Mr. Scamander, but he's retired and living in seclusion. Few know where he is." Flitwick spread his hands helplessly. "Oh, by the way, Lucien, how did you get the idea of using an undetectable extension charm to contain living creatures?" Lucien scratched his head. Actually, I just thought the bed in the dormitory was a bit small and wanted to make it bigger." Flitwick stared for a moment, then burst out laughing. "Ha! You truly are an interesting and enterprising young wizard." Lucien had another motive he didn't confess. He wanted to contain some fantastic beasts for observation, to prepare for future research into the transfiguration of magical creatures. If he had something like Newt's case, he could cut down his trips to the Forbidden Forest, much more convenient. They went on to discuss variant applications of common spells and advanced techniques. Lucien asked about spells he might need later, like the disillusionment charm and the tracking charm for searching the Forbidden Forest. Time slipped by. By noon, Lucien stood to leave. "Professor, I won't keep you. Thank you for explaining things to me." Flitwick waved a hand, pleased. "Don't mention it. I'm delighted to see students who love to learn." He paused, remembering his conversation with McGonagall at the sorting ceremony. Ravenclaw had gained a promising student. "Oh, wait, Lucien." Flitwick flicked a wrist and a sheet of paper and a quill floated over. The quill wrote a short list and signed Flitwick's name at the bottom. He handed it to Lucien. "These are a few advanced charms books. If you're interested, take this to the library and give it to Madame Pince. She'll help you find them." Lucien's face lit up. "Thank you, Professor." He'd planned to visit the library that night, so the list was perfectly timed. He left the office with the paper in hand. A few minutes later, Flitwick inspected the teacup with the undetectable extension charm again. Though there was room for improvement, for a first-year student, it was astonishing. A resonant voice then entered the room. "Phileas, are you there? I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Flitwick looked up to find Albus Dumbledore already seated opposite him. "Oh, did you brew black tea? It's still hot." "Phileas, your black tea is the best in the whole school," Dumbledore said, reaching for a cup. He opened the sugar bowl, dropped several sugar cubes into his teacup, and then frowned. It still wasn't sweet enough. He eyed the cup and then gave a little chuckle. "Ha ha, Phileas, why did you put an undetectable extension charm on the teacup and add so many minor household spells?" "The effect is interesting," Dumbledore added, peering at the cup. He noticed the combination of spells wasn't perfectly refined, but assumed it was one of Flitwick's tinkering whims. "Phileas, I'm here about that boy, Lucien Grafton. Has he attended your class?" Flitwick nodded, suddenly peculiar. "That makes it easier to talk. What do you think of Lucien's talent? I mean, purely in charms." If Dumbledore hadn't looked so serious, Flitwick might have thought him at it again with a joke. He pointed to the teacup in Dumbledore's hand and tried to keep his voice steady. All the spells on that cup were cast by him. Dumbledore's expression changed to one of clear surprise. Flitwick recounted their whole interaction, Lucien's questions, the way he applied the spells, the undetectable extension charm. As Flitwick spoke, Dumbledore's conviction of the Sorting Hat's judgment deepened, a talent seen once in a millennium. "It's a pity," Flitwick said. "The boy wanted to use an undetectable extension charm to contain living creatures. I told him only the Scamanders really mastered that, and Newt has retired." The name Newt jolted Dumbledore. He'd known Newt well once, an old friend, and it had been too long since they'd corresponded. He could write a letter, say hello, and maybe ask Newt about this for Lucien. He cleared his throat and said, "Phileas, thank you for telling me. Lucien's talent is quite outstanding, but he's from a Muggle family, and his understanding of magic is still incomplete. He might attempt something dangerous by accident. Such a genius needs proper guidance. You're the head of Ravenclaw. Please pay special attention to him." Flitwick agreed wholeheartedly. Rapid progress students require even more careful direction. Then he paused, catching on to a particular phrase. "Wait, Albus, did you say Lucien is from a Muggle family? No wizarding elders in his background?" "That's right. Then where did he learn the spells he's already mastered?" The two old men exchanged a look that held the same unspoken question. How could a mere check reveal such a big problem? Meanwhile, Lucien was headed to the Great Hall for lunch. He passed the potions classroom just as the bell rang and the door burst open. Professor Snape stormed out, looking as gloomy as ever. "Professor Snape, good day," a student called politely, but Snape only grunted and swept past Lucien. Humph. Who had set him off this time? No matter, Snape always seemed to be in a foul mood. Noticing the professor's sullen face beneath his greasy black hair, Lucien glanced through the open classroom door and saw other students emerging. Among them was Harry, his face tight with frustration and resentment. 24. You must stare at him, even when you cry. Hogwarts Great Hall. Scattered along the long tables, students ate lunch. The air was thick with the smells of fried fish, chips, and steak. Lucien cut into his fish, muttering again about Britain's culinary deserts. He missed Chinese food, the tastes of home. Back home, he could have a chef cook whatever he wanted. At Hogwarts, house elves could learn Chinese cooking, right? He should ask them sometime. It would be a good way to improve everyone's meals. Squeak, squeak, Lucien looked up at the noise. Harry, sitting opposite him, was frowning, vigorously cutting at the steak on his plate as if it were an enemy. Snape's picking on me again. I told him I didn't know the answer, and Hermione had her hand up wanting to answer, but Snape just kept grilling me. Harry protested indignantly. What did I ever do to him? Lucien watched Harry bury his face in his food and suddenly had an idea. When Professor Snape was scolding you, were you looking down? Harry looked up, chewed a mouthful of beef, swallowed, and said, Yeah, Lucien, you missed it. Then he put down his knife and fork, took off his glasses, fixed Lucien with a serious glare, and in a perfect impression of Snape's voice, demanded, Oh, Potter, tell me, what do you get when you add powdered asphodel root to an infusion of wormwood? Can't answer? Then where would you look if you were trying to find a bezoar? Pfft. Ron, who had been sipping mushroom soup, almost spat it out at the impression. He quickly covered his mouth, choking. Lucien couldn't help smiling. Harry had a sharp tongue after all. Harry spread his hands and put his glasses back on. Lucien, Snape was right on top of me. If I hadn't looked down, his spit would have been all over my face. And he even sat right opposite me at the end, just staring. Harry added, I could practically smell his greasy hair. I wanted to send him a bottle of shampoo. Lucien was a little surprised. He hadn't expected such barbs from this kid. Ron, having recovered, glanced at Harry and muttered, "Send him Potter brand shampoo, the one from your family. Maybe he'll be a bit merciful when he kills you." Seeing the two of them launching into their exchange, Lucien cut in with a different question. "Harry, you wear those glasses because you're nearsighted, right?" Harry nodded. Lucien went on, "Have you ever thought about taking your glasses off during class, especially potions?" Harry, Hermione, and Ron stared at him. "But if I take off my glasses, I can't read the board. Won't that make Snape pick on me even more?" Lucien inwardly rolled his eyes. "Of course, those glasses make you look like your father. No wonder Snape targets you." He snapped his fingers. "There's a potion, Bright Eyes, that restores sight for 2 or 3 hours. It's part of first-year potions. It shouldn't be difficult to brew." Harry scratched his head. "Sorry, I'm not very good at brewing potions." Lucien regarded him steadily. "How long have you been taking potions? Why are you so quick to dismiss yourself? And don't despise the subject just because you dislike the teacher. Knowledge itself isn't good or bad." Harry blinked, puzzled but inclined to trust him. "And once you take your glasses off," Lucien continued, "if Professor Snape still singles you out, do this. Stare him in the eye. Even if you're being scolded to tears, stare at him." Now Harry was baffled. Hermione and Ron exchanged looks. Ron asked for his friend. Lucien, will that really work, won't it?" Lucien waved his hand. "If you haven't mastered what the teacher is teaching, you should show all the more your eagerness to learn. The eyes are the windows to the soul. Use your gaze to tell Professor Snape, you may be slow to learn now, but you are determined." The three were left a little stunned. Something about it felt off, but they couldn't find a flaw. They finished eating. Lucien picked up his book. "Is your first class this afternoon also Defense Against the Dark Arts?" They nodded, faces bright with anticipation. Defense Against the Dark Arts promised something more practical than charms, actual combat magic. Harry looked especially eager. The morning's potions lesson had dampened him, and he was ready for real magic. Lucien gave them a small, sympathetic smile. "Let's go. Time for class." Afternoon. The Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. After the bell, the long-awaited professor arrived late. Professor Quirrell, his head wrapped in bandages. He brought with him a sharp smell, garlic, and a few students instinctively covered their noses. Lucien tapped his wand and cast a freshening charm over his mouth and nose, filtering the strong scent away. "Hello, I am QQ Quirinus Q Quirrell," the professor stammered. "Your Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher." The classroom buzzed. Ron leaned toward Lucien and whispered, "Is this really the Defense Against the Dark Arts, Professor? Is stuttering allowed? He's not a substitute, is he?" Hermione offered hesitantly. "Maybe his theoretical knowledge is very good, and his magic is strong?" Even she sounded uncertain. "All right, let's begin with Chapter 1. Quirrell began, and then proceeded to lecture on the meaning of Defense Against the Dark Arts, its forms, its development, and its future prospects. Lucien narrowed his eyes. He felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Wasn't this the bald professor he remembered from the university he'd been at before he transmigrated? Brilliant in theory, awful at teaching. How did he end up here? Was this really Hogwarts? After an hour that felt twice as long, the bell finally rang. The students in Defense Against the Dark Arts breathed as one. Professor Quirrell exhaled a long, almost theatrical sigh. He packed his things in a hurry and left the classroom so fast he might have been on some errand for his master. Lucien watched him go with a growing sense of disbelief. Quirrell played the obsequious lackey so convincingly it was hard to believe someone who could be a Hogwarts professor could be so useless. Lucien flicked through the Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook and scowled. It was mostly theory. Real duels were decided in an instant. Reflexes, decisive spells, the sorts of responses you couldn't glean from pages of exposition. Thinking about a whole year of Quirrell's half-hearted teaching made his teeth itch. If it weren't for Dumbledore's caution, watching the man because of the possibility that Voldemort might return, Lucien was certain Quirrell would have been dismissed long ago. At that thought, a plan formed. Since Quirrell was technically his teacher, perhaps he could be used, perhaps even Tom. Lucien smiled inwardly, closed the book, and left the classroom. He had no more lessons that day. It was time for the library. The library fell silent the moment he stepped inside. Not out of reverence, it was because of the thin, grim librarian who patrolled the stacks like a hawk with a feather duster. Madame Pince swept along the aisles, one wrong move, and she would shoo you out without mercy. Lucien found her quickly. Madame Pince? She nodded at his soft voice. He handed over the book list Professor Flitwick had given him. Madame Pince glanced down, and her frown deepened. The list included achievements in charms, development of silent spells, application of combined spells, books normally borrowed by students preparing for NEMs. There were 10 volumes in all, far more than a first year would usually request. "What year are you in?" she asked sharply. "First year," Lucien replied. Madame Pince hesitated only for a moment, then peered at Flitwick's signature and the required magical imprint. Neither was the sort of thing easy to fake. "Wait a moment," she said briskly, and went to the shelves without a second glance. She seemed to know exactly where each book lived, moving among the rows without using Accio or any obvious charm. Lucien watched her handle the bindings with a care that suggested she prized the books more than convenience. The idea that she might be a squib crossed his mind and fell away. Who would guard the restricted section if they couldn't tell a charm from a curse? And he let her reverence for the volumes stand as it was. Madame Pince returned with the stack and placed them gently in his arms. "Do not damage them. Violators will be punished," she warned. "The loan period is 1 month. If you need to renew, register with me." Lucien thanked her and on impulse picked up a couple more books on transfiguration and potions before registering them as well. He slung his arms full of leather-bound volumes and headed out, the anticipation of new knowledge making his step quick. Rounding a corner just outside the library, he failed to notice someone emerging from between the shelves. The collision was sudden, a gasp, a flurry of flying books. "Wingardium Leviosa," Lucien snapped, wand out before he could think. The scattered books lifted and righted themselves into neat piles. "Oh," came a small voice. A pale, light-haired girl sat on the floor, rubbing her wrist. Lucien helped her up. "Sorry, are you all right?" The girl looked at him with a faint, poised smile. "You're Lucien." Her tone sharpened a memory. He'd stood out at the opening ceremony. Daphne Greengrass, she supplied, as if that should settle their acquaintance. Eldest daughter of the Greengrass family. Lucien inclined his head. "Lucien Grafton, I remember. History of magic this afternoon?" Daphne's expression smoothed into an approving one. He noticed the Slytherin crest on her robe and the way she held herself, all cool elegance and lifted chin. Her wrist was still tender. Feeling partly responsible, Lucien raised his wand one more time. Episci. A soft white glow wrapped her wrist, and the pain eased almost instantly. Her eyes widened in pleasant surprise. "A healing charm? Thank you." "You're welcome," Lucien said, keeping his voice neutral. He had other plans for the evening. Dinner in the Great Hall, then straight to his dormitory and the textbooks. Silent spells, potion technique. The night promised the kind of studying that would actually teach him things. Daphne's smile brightened, as if he'd accepted some great compliment. "Lucien, would you care to join me for dinner?" There was an almost ritual posture to her invitation, a way of speaking that made it seem like a favor to be granted. Lucien recognized it. He'd seen noble girls at banquets behave the same way, all polish and expectation. Greengrass, a sacred 28 family, Slytherin, she would be an asset in certain circles, and perhaps, he thought, a complication. "I appreciate the offer, but I have something I need to do this evening," he said and turned away. Daphne's smile froze. For a heartbeat, she looked as if she hadn't quite expected to be refused. Lucien walked on with his books held close, already tasting the ink and parchment waiting for him in the common room, Ravenclaw dormitory. Lucien sat on the edge of his bed with a book titled The Development of Silent Spells, his wand held loosely in his right hand. He skimmed the pages and occasionally flicked the wand as he tried to put theory into practice. Silent spells let a witch or wizard form the effect of a charm in their mind and release it through a wand without speaking. Incantations had originally served as a focus and a guide for the flow of magic. Silent spells demanded that the caster become the guide. He thought through the essentials: First, you had to be familiar enough with a spell to build its effect mentally. Second, you needed exceptional concentration and fine control. The thought had to be clear, forceful, and free from distraction. To start, he practiced the simplest charm. Pointing his wand at a book, he thought one word, levitate, and felt the magic slide through the wand. The book trembled, rose from the desk, and floated gently in the air. Not so hard, he thought. Silent spells were supposed to be taught in the 6th year, but a requirement in the text made sense. A caster needed a certain reservoir of magic. Magic capacity grew with age, especially after puberty, but Lucien's SS-grade talent meant his reserves and growth outpaced the ordinary. He had enough to use silent spells with relative ease. In terms of pure magic, he was already close to an adult wizard. He turned pages and tried other charms. He sent the bed pillow drifting, then shrank a vase. A quick whoosh of crimson erupted from his wand, and he shaped it into a ring of fire, feeling the heat of incendio. Basic spells held well when cast silently. The power loss was minimal and stability remained high. More complex charms, however, weakened noticeably when done without voice, and some required incantations to be practical. Still, the chief advantage of silent spells lay in stealth, surprise. If you could unsettle an opponent and break their rhythm, that was enough. When he'd had his fill of exercises, he closed the book and, since it was still early, opened another. Potent potions. He paged to the calming and sedative section and remembered his plan. Little Cheelin would be asleep for 6 more days, plenty of time to brew some potions. He could combine them with a spell and render a magical creature unconscious safely. He tapped his wand against the page and called the system. System, any potion-related loans available. The display listed options. Improved potion formula, weekly loan. Learn a method for brewing an improved potion formula with effects surpassing the original and reduced material consumption. Task, successfully brew 5 different potions. Beginner finished potion, daily loan. Obtain 1 beginner potion within Hogwarts' 1st to 3rd year curriculum. Task, successfully brew 1 identical potion. For daily loans, he could specify the potion type 1st to 3rd year potions would do. As for the improved formulas, he wondered if he could borrow an improved formula and then request a finished potion of that improved type. System, do finished potion loans include improved potions? If I learn that improved formula first, the system replied. You need to successfully brew an improved potion once first. Congratulations to the host for discovering a hidden use of loans. Lucien smiled at the system's cheeky message. A loophole, then. He asked the system to show available improvement formulas and scanned the list until he found what he wanted. Improved sleeping draught, a calming, sleep-inducing potion suitable for wizards and many magical creatures. Wizards fall asleep in 5 seconds. Magical creatures fall asleep in 10 seconds to 2 minutes, depending on size. The potion was exactly what he wanted. Faster acting and more efficient. Every material saved mattered. He'd brought only so many supplies from Diagon Alley. First years in particular could not restock easily at Hogwarts. He planned to pair the draught with a close-range silent charm to subdue creatures without injury. A sleeping animal was always easier to handle. He borrowed the improved formula and gathered his equipment from his trunk, a small cauldron, a set of scales, and the ingredients for the sleeping draught. Before brewing, he prepared a few alertness herbs, grinding them into powder and extracting juices to stuff into a gauze mask. The mask's purpose was simple: inhale the stimulant vapors to keep himself awake while brewing. Without it, the potion's scent might have made him drowsy mid-process. Following the formula precisely, he sliced, ground, and steeped ingredients. He heated the cauldron and adjusted the flame with his wand, measuring additions to the letter. It was his first time on this exact recipe, so his hands weren't perfectly smooth. He'd practiced a handful of basic potions at home, but his A-grade potion talent showed. A-grade wasn't genius, but it put him at the top of competent practitioners. With diligence, he could master all standard techniques. The sparks of invention might come later. For now, mastery and patience were enough. As he worked, his control over heat and timing improved. The mixture's bubbles thinned and the liquid thickened. The color shifted toward a pale blue. A faint orchid scent wafted through the dormitory. He could smell it even through the mask. though the cooling layer in the mask kept drowsiness at bay. When the brew reached the right consistency, it began to solidify into an ointment as it cooled. Lucien compared the result with the formula's description and nodded. He carefully poured the finished draught into a small iron can and, following a note in the improved recipe for delivery, inserted a candle wick, preparing it to be used as a slow-release sleeping incense. He set it down and leaned back, relieved. Phew, done. The dormitory door clicked open. Terry came in, sniffing unconsciously. "Lucien, are you brewing a potion?" "Preparing for." He didn't finish. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped forward. Instinctively, Lucien pointed his wand and sent a silent levitation charm to catch Terry before his head struck the floor. He eased his roommate down onto the bed and, with another flick, opened the window to blow the lingering scent out into the night. The orchid-tinged aroma still clung to the air, but it was dissipating. Terry lay there, peaceful and pale, clearly out cold but unharmed. Lucien glanced at him, then at the small iron can with its wick. Effective, he thought. The improved draught worked exactly as promised. 27. Potions. "Hey, Terry, wake up. It's time for class." Terry blinked awake to the voice of his roommate, Lucien. He squinted around. "Is this the dorm room? You came back last night and smelled like something." Lucien's mouth twitched and he turned his head away. How could this kid still remember? The improved sleeping draught had knocked Terry out for a solid night. If Lucien hadn't woken him, he probably would still be asleep. The potion's sustained effect was impressively long. "You must have been exhausted after yesterday's classes. You crashed as soon as you got back. Hurry up and get ready. First period is potions with Professor Snape." At the mention of Snape, Terry shot upright. Their seniors had warned them. Snape was the one teacher in the whole school you absolutely could not offend. "Oh, right, I'm up. I can't be late for his class." Lucien watched Terry wake, change, and wash in under 5 minutes and sighed inwardly. That was Snape's reputation for you. "I'm ready. Let's go." When the class bell rang, the potions classroom door swung open. A tall, thin man with a prominent hook nose entered. His black cloak billowed as he walked, and his voice, cold and cutting, filled the room. "In my class, there will be no waving of wands, no casting of spells. I do not expect most of you to master the subtleties of potion making. For the few with aptitude, however." He let the words hang as he scanned the students. His gaze lingered on Lucien. He remembered the boy who had made a spectacle at the sorting and who had even been singled out by Professor McGonagall. "I can teach you to bewitch the mind, ensnare the senses. I can teach you to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop her death." A ripple of awe passed through the younger Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs. Some straightened instinctively, already picturing the possibilities. Lucien listened calmly. The speech was persuasive, though in his mind, Snape's emphasis on stopping death sounded more like a quest for a resurrection potion or a draught of regret to reverse events than a literal promise. When Snape snapped his fingers, writing appeared on the blackboard. "This lesson, we will brew the sleeping draught. As described, a wizard will fall asleep within 10 seconds of ingestion. Magical creatures vary between 30 seconds and 6 minutes, depending on size." Lucien's eyes flicked at the description. The improved sleeping draught he'd been taught was indeed stronger than the standard version, especially against magical beasts. The onset was significantly quicker. When testing creatures, he usually burned incense to lull them first so he could observe and record more easily. After outlining the effects and uses, Snape moved on to technique. This was when Lucien leaned in. No matter how curt Snape could be, he had been a prodigy, the youngest potion master of his time. His methods were worth attention. Saprophoros beans must be pressed for juice with the flat of a silver knife, not sliced, and stirred counterclockwise until the liquid runs clear. Snape's mention of such a minor processing detail made Lucien sit up straighter. There were always nuances that separated an average brew from a perfect one. While he compared Snape's instructions to the improved formula he already knew, he took rapid notes, refining his understanding. "All right, begin brewing." The students set to work. As Lucien arranged his ingredients, he tapped his system. "System, to repay the formula loan, I need to brew 5 potions. Can the improved sleeping draught and the original count as 2 different ones?" No, host, this is not a valid way to repay the loan. Lucien sighed. No exploiting bugs, then. He would brew the improved draught repeatedly. If he borrowed another finished potion, he could save time, consuming one set of ingredients but producing two final products. Once little Qilin woke, Lucien planned to head into the Forbidden Forest to find 5 magical creatures and record their information. Better to have extra sleeping draughts on hand. I want to loan a beginner finished potion, daily loan, the improved sleeping draught. Loan successful. Item has been stored in system space. Please check at any time. Snape left the podium and began to inspect the students' techniques. Bones, why aren't you wearing a mask? Planning to wash your face in the cauldron? Abbott, stop sniveling. There is no need to add a little girl's tears when brewing a sleeping draught. It was the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs' first potions class with Snape, and their first exposure to his particular brand of intimidation. Lucien had just weighed out valerian sprigs and was about to grind them when a cold voice cut behind him. Grafton, did I forget to mention 8 grams for valerian? Why did you weigh only 5? Lucien kept working and put the sprigs into the mortar. Yes, Professor, you said 8 grams. But ground to a powder 5 grams is insufficient. Snape snapped. I ground it finer. Lucien replied, grinding. If it's powdered, 5 grams will suffice. Snape pressed on, tone icier. But I specified slices. Powdered valerian loses its potency much faster once added to the cauldron. Lucien didn't flinch. If I lower the flame to 150 degrees Celsius when adding it, the powder will integrate more slowly. He argued calmly, because he believed the technique justified the choice. If the reasoning was sound, Snape could judge the method on its merits. For a moment Snape was silent. Then, with that faintly disdainful tone, he said, Grafton, opportunism has no place in potion-making. He turned away without declaring whether the method was acceptable. Terry, who'd been watching, leaned in and whispered, his voice trembling. Even though he asked you, I wanted to shake. Weren't you scared? Why should I be? Lucien answered. Was my technique wrong? But Professor Snape, if I'd been wrong, wouldn't he have scolded me until I corrected it? Terry scratched his head. Lucien's logic was hard to refute. Lucien glanced over and gave a curt reminder. If you don't stir, your potion will burn. Oh, right! Lucien continued his brewing, Snape drifting back occasionally to prod at his technique. He answered each question smoothly, his hands steady as if he'd been brewing for years. At last, his sleeping draught was the first finished. He handed the phial to Snape, who stood nearby. Professor, would you care to examine it? Is it up to standard? Snape glanced once at Lucien's vial of sleeping draught and nodded. No need to test it. This potion is fine. As potions master, having watched Lucien brew most of it himself, Snape didn't need a taste to know the potion exceeded classroom standards. Lucien Grafton, for not following the professor's instructions, Ravenclaw loses 3 points. For being the first to finish the potion with skilled technique and correct methods, Ravenclaw gains 8 points. Lucien frowned at the subtraction and the addition. Just add 5 points and be done with it. Why be so awkward? If Snape could be more straightforward, none of that mess from before would have happened. Class dismissed. Pack up your equipment. Do not leave anything in the classroom. As the students left, Snape added, Grafton, come to my office. Lucien's stomach tightened. Had he done something wrong? But he'd been rewarded too. He packed his tools, letting them float obediently behind him, and followed Snape. The office's oppressive atmosphere hit him the moment he stepped through the door. 2 rows of shelves were lined with bottles and jars. Lucien's curiosity flickered as he took it in. It looked exactly like the witch or wizard's cottage he'd imagined. Bat wings, dried frogs, pungent herbs. He paused at a glass jar that held what looked like an intact unicorn horn. Beside it, a dragon's heart, a phoenix tail feather. An entire row of shelves gleamed with rare and precious magical ingredients. As expected of a master of potions, he'd amassed a fortune in reagents. Sit, Snape said flatly. Lucien sat across from him. Who taught you the method for brewing this sleeping draught? The question made Lucien frown. The recipe had been a loan from the system. There shouldn't be any provenance issues. Could Snape tell where a formula came from? I saw the original version in a book, Lucien answered. When I practiced, I tried a few changes. Luckily, the potion's effect didn't get worse. Snape's expression didn't soften. Let's be direct. The method you used is excellent. It reduces ingredient consumption and strengthens the effect. I'd estimate it improves potency 2 to 3-fold. This is a basic potion. If this improvement is truly yours, I would like to include your method in future textbooks. You will be compensated, of course. I would not stoop to stealing a student's achievement. If you learned it from your family or a mentor, tell them and they will be compensated as well. Lucien stared. Incorporate my improvement into textbooks and pay me? The formula had been loaned to him by the system. He hadn't even repaid it yet. The loan required brewing 5 potions. So far, he'd only made the sleeping draught. If he gave Snape the formula now and later failed to repay the system, would the system reclaim it, and what would that mean for the copy Snape possessed? He could be paid now and still keep what he gained, like borrowing money, investing it, and keeping the profit when the lender took back only the principal. System, what if I? He began under his breath. The system's reply was blunt and almost scolding. A kind and upright host should not exploit such loopholes. Stop trying to game the rules. Lucien sighed and gave in. All right, I'm not exploiting anything. I'll repay the loan. He felt a little thrill at the prospect anyway. Learning a few potions wasn't hard, and by repaying the loan he'd secure the improved formula, brew more potions, and still be paid by Snape, a favorable trade. This formula is my own improvement, Lucien said. I'm from a Muggle family, not from any wizarding mentor. Snape opened his mouth as if to nod, then froze. You're from a Muggle family? Yes. You're saying a first year, a new witch or wizard, improved a potion formula? Yes. Snape's face cooled. He suspected a lie, a young pupil vainly claiming credit. Very well. Explain to me, then, how you refined and improved the formula. Lucien wasn't flustered. He'd practiced the sleeping draught the night before, and with Snape's class earlier, his understanding had deepened. He organized his thoughts and spoke through the key changes, step by step. As he explained, Snape's look shifted from contempt to genuine interest. To be honest, Lucien finished, my potion talent is fairly ordinary. It was mostly luck. Sleeping draught is a basic potion. I got lucky. That wasn't dishonest. Compared with his SS-level aptitudes in transfiguration and the dark arts, and his other magical talents, Lucien's potion skill was only an A. He meant it. But Snape's mouth tightened. To improve a potion without formal training, to have that flash of insight most people never find, and then call it luck? Lucien's modesty struck Snape the wrong way, reminding him of the smugness he saw so often in Slytherin. As head of house, something in Snape's face darkened. Lucien noticed the change and grew nervous. Had he offended him? Ahem, Snape said, voice colder than before. Do not belittle yourself. Your talent for potions is quite good. Relief flooded Lucien, so Snape wasn't angry. He forced a polite smile. Thank you, Professor. Inspiration or luck is only a fleeting spark. I'll continue to study carefully. Lucien was already thinking of what to ask for as payment. Ingredients might not help much. Ready-made potions weren't what he needed. What he wanted in the short term were auxiliary potions to help him approach and study magical creatures, draughts that masked scent or caused curiosity. He'd ask Snape later. While Lucien planned, Snape's gaze went distant. The phrase, inspiration or luck is only a fleeting spark, drifted back to him, and for a moment, his expression softened into something unreadable. He thought of a girl with fiery red hair and emerald eyes, Muggle-born, brilliant at potions, unassuming when praised. Thank you for your encouragement, Severus, she had told him once. Inspiration is a fleeting spark. Hard work is what endures. Lucien looked up to finish his sentence. Professor, I am willing to exchange the formula, and met Snape's face. It was a strange mixture of a smile and tears, his eyes hollow. 29. Exchange formula, title loan, Professor Snape? Lucien asked tentatively. Snape immediately smoothed back his expression, returning to his usual impenetrable mask. Lucien grumbled inwardly. The old bat could change his face in a heartbeat. Since you're willing to exchange, you can decide what reward you want now, Snape said in a flat tone, as if the earlier flicker of emotion had never happened. A sheet of parchment and a quill floated in front of Lucien, inviting him to write down the improved sleeping draught formula. Lucien copied it, thinking about what he should ask for in return. Ideally, it would be a potion formula that could mask his scent or his movements. Since this was a formula for formula trade, Snape would probably agree. As the most promising and youngest potions master, he certainly possessed many formulas. Lucien decided against asking for bait-type potions that attract magical creatures. That would be far too suspicious for a first year. He instead tried for something more plausible. "Professor, may I exchange for a potion formula that masks scent or sound?" Lucien asked. Snape nodded without hesitation and sent another sheet drifting toward him, the words writing themselves across it. He assumed Lucien was being childish, wanting the potion for pranks or simply to learn a new recipe. Lucien glanced down and read, "Cloak oil. Apply to wrists to eliminate personal scent and reduce movement noise. Lasts 1 hour." Perfect. It covered both scent and sound. As expected of Snape, only quality stuff. The trade had been worth it. After the exchange, Lucien left Snape's office. Potions had been a double period, and it was now lunchtime, so the Great Hall was relatively empty. He ate quickly and then hurried to herbology. Ravenclaw shared the class with Gryffindor, and as soon as he reached the herbology classroom, someone called out, "Lucien, over here!" Hermione waved, and Harry and Ron turned to look. "Good afternoon, Lucien. What did you have this morning?" Lucien nodded to the three of them. "Potions." "Hiss!" Harry inhaled sharply, clearly remembering something from his last potions class. Hermione looked concerned. "Professor Snape didn't make things difficult for you, did he? After all, you're so excellent and study so diligently." Lucien considered a moment. Snape had given him extra points and effectively handed over a useful new formula. "No, he's fine." Harry stared at him in open astonishment. Snape a good person? Impossible. He also recalled Lucien's suggestion to take his glasses off for Snape's class, but Harry still couldn't brew potions. Lucien idly fiddled with the herbology tools while waiting for class to start. When his finger brushed a small hoe, the system chimed inside his head. "Ding, congratulations to the host for triggering a loan. Loan name, Diligent Little Gardener. Loan content. After wearing this title, the host gains magical plant affinity, increased plant yields, and shortened growth cycles. Plant 10 Chinese chomping cabbage and bring them to maturity. Do you wish to take out the loan?" He hadn't expected touching a hoe to trigger a loan. The last passive trigger like this had been when he browsed a pet shop in Diagon Alley and took the Chelan loan. Lucien studied the loan details. The title type was new to him. Magical plant affinity sounded promising. The system's note, unless magical plants are controlled or driven by someone, they will not actively attack the host, reassured him. Many magical plants were aggressive, and he sometimes needed them for potion or alchemy ingredients. Doubling yields and shortening growth cycles were useful too. The task, though, gave him pause. He remembered from herbology textbooks that biting cabbage normally took at least 2 months to mature. This was a monthly loan, due in 30 days. Then again, the title's effect shortened growth times, and he'd read about a fertilizer potion in Powerful Potions that accelerated plant maturity. With both, he might be able to get them mature within a month. That would make the loan feasible. He already had to repay the improved formula, a weekly loan. Including the sleeping draught and cloak oil exchanges, he still needed to brew 3 more potions. Fertilizer, simple insecticides, and herbicides were within his ability and could help him repay the formula loans as well. And Chinese chomping cabbage had other uses. Their bite could cut through bone. Once grown, they could be used as hidden weapons. Toss one out and it would chase and sink its teeth into an enemy. A physical attack like that could be unexpected and sometimes more effective than a spell. He'd just need a place to grow them. After class, he could ask Professor Sprout to use a greenhouse nearby. System, take out the Diligent Little Gardener loan, he decided. Ding, Diligent Little Gardener, monthly loan, application successful. Evaluation, do you feel your farming soul awakening? Lucien noticed that his system panel now showed his name with Diligent Little Gardener appended. He picked up the small shovel and hoe, one in each hand, and for some reason felt a sudden urge to plant something. Chapter 30, Herbology. Harry's passion Professor Sprout stood in the center of the greenhouse and smiled at the class. Welcome, everyone, to Herbology. Today we will be learning how to divide and transplant dittany. Lucien immediately recalled the herb. Dittany was common, useful both to witches and wizards and in the muggle world for medicinal purposes. It was often mixed with horklump juice to make a basic healing potion. As Professor Sprout described the plant's characteristics, then moved on to transplantation techniques and precautions, Lucien listened intently. He suspected his newly acquired diligent little gardener skill was behind it. The herbology knowledge and cultivation steps seemed to settle into his mind all at once. He could feel himself itching to get his hands in the soil. Dittany is very easy to grow, Professor Sprout said. Keep the soil loose and plant the rhizomes near the bottom of the pot. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect the first time. Herbology is a living subject. It requires patience and practice. Her kindly encouragement seemed to calm a few nervous students. You may begin. Lucien picked up a small hoe and worked the soil until it was light and friable, then paused. He poured the fortifying potion that had been provided evenly into the pot and stirred the soil with a trowel until the potion was well mixed. Even though it was his first time doing this in class, the motions felt familiar, as though he had practiced them many times. The diligent little gardener ability seemed to come with a cultivation proficiency. He understood the crucial points immediately. The scent was right. Once he planted the dittany, the potion would reach perfect potency. He examined the clump of dittany, noting how the roots were tangled, and then began to separate them. His movements were gentle and controlled, steady, not slow. Under his hands, the roots came apart quickly, without harm to even the smallest rootlets. He planted the separated pieces in the pot, covered them with soil, and firmed it down appropriately. He breathed out a soft sigh and wiped the dampness from his forehead. Gardening was unexpectedly satisfying. Well done, Grafton. Professor Sprout's praise came quietly from behind him. She had watched him the whole time and waited until he finished to speak. Thank you, Professor, Lucien replied. Very skillful and careful, she said. Have you done gardening before? Professor Sprout remembered seeing Lucien at Flourish and Blots with Professor McGonagall, and she assumed he might be from a muggle family who had experience with plants. Lucien shook his head. No, Professor. This is my first time cultivating plants. She brightened. Then this is most impressive. The roots are intact, the soil is well loosened, and the potion's evaporation rate is just right. Grafton, you might be very good at herbology. If you were in Hufflepuff, I think you'd fit in well. Before she finished, she called out, Grafton, first to complete the dittany transplant. 5 points to Ravenclaw. She then added, would you mind helping your classmates? She nodded toward Harry and Ron. Harry was only slow at separating the plant. Ron, judging by the way he was tugging, was likely to tear it if he didn't calm down. Lucien agreed readily. Not long after Professor Sprout moved on, Hermione let out an exasperated sigh. Lucien, besides being incredible at spells, how do you know so much about herbology? Hermione had been top of her class for as long as she could remember. She worked harder than anyone, reading books, practicing spells, and previewing lessons. Yet Lucien always seemed one step ahead, which frustrated her. How did you get the dittany so right? Is ours a different strain? Ron, with dirt on his hands and smudges in his red hair, dropped his piece of dittany and scratched his head. Yeah, Lucien, how'd you do it so fast? Is our dittany different? Hermione rolled her eyes. Weasley, don't be daft, and wash your hair when we get back. Harry shook his head. He liked Ron's enthusiasm and humor, but he could be exasperatingly silly at times. Then, as if struck by another thought, Harry slowed his own movements. It's not just herbology. If Lucien thinks Snape's good, maybe he's brilliant at potions too. Lucien spread his hands. I didn't mean to stand out. I just took out a lot of loans, that's all. His reply left the three of them bewildered. Seeing their faces, Lucien thought, sigh, this pleasure isn't for sharing with outsiders. Then Harry suddenly became very interested. You borrowed money? Harry asked, beaming. Do you need some? I've still got plenty of galleons at Gringotts. Lucien blinked. He hadn't expected Harry's excitement. Was Gryffindor always so ready to offer everything to a friend? In Lucien's experience, Hufflepuffs were loyal and kind. Gryffindors, he thought, were fiercely devoted, bound to help a comrade no matter what. It made him feel oddly bemused how highly he seemed to rate in Harry's estimation. Putting awkward thoughts aside, Lucien began to walk the three through the transplantation step by step. His instructions were clear and methodical, and even Ron managed to finish without ruining his plant. They had time left before the bell. The three of them looked at Lucien with renewed admiration. He didn't just learn quickly, he taught quickly too. Herbology ended successfully, and the students began to leave. Lucien said goodbye to Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but Harry caught up to him as they walked out. "Lucien, are you free?" he asked. Lucien raised an eyebrow. "Are you short on money?" he replied with mild suspicion. Harry hesitated then, as though deciding to be frank, blurted out, "No, well, never mind. I mean, Lucien, I want to learn potions." "You want to learn potions from me? What, you want me to teach you basketball?" Lucien's incredulous words stunned Harry for a moment. "No, potions, Lucien. I want you to teach me how to brew potions," Harry murmured. Lucien sighed inwardly. No one wanted to play this joke with him, so Harry really wanted tutoring. Was it because he intended to brew a Bright Eyes potion and take off his glasses in Snape's class? The shadow Snape had cast over the boy was deeper than Lucien had thought. It could even push him to study. Seeing Lucien hesitate, Harry hurried on. "Lucien, don't worry. I'll pay for the tutoring. How many galleons do you want?" Lucien wasn't worried about money. He wasn't short of a few galleons. The Potter family had centuries of history and considerable wealth in the wizarding world, certainly. And the Grafton family, Lucien's own line, with its Muggle world business connections, nobles and celebrities alike bent to Aunt Penelope's whims, heirs like him cultivated favors and influence. Families that survived for generations accumulated more than gold: wealth, connections, experience, and knowledge. Wait, knowledge? Did an old wizarding family really leave Harry only galleons and an invisibility cloak? Impossible. Muggle dynasties passed down trade secrets. Wizarding ones must leave magic manuals, rare spells, potion and alchemy recipes. Lucien's look at Harry shifted, suddenly bright with genuine curiosity and appreciation for inherited knowledge and family collections. Still, he softened his voice, as if wounded. "Harry, we're friends. Don't insult me with money." Harry panicked. He wanted to learn potions now and avoid Snape's next difficulty. No, Lucien, I was wrong. I shouldn't have." Lucien cut him off. "You know me. I like to read. I like to learn new things. If you're willing to lend me some family books to read, tutoring and potions are no problem." Harry blinked, half disbelieving. "Just borrow books? That's all you want?" Lucien spread his hands casually. "What else? After I read them a few times and pick up the knowledge inside, books as vessels of knowledge are meant to be used, studied, preserved, or displayed on a shelf if that's what one prefers." "Oh, of course. Show them off," Harry said, nodding too fast. Yes. But I don't have any magic books," Harry added, sheepish, pushing his glasses up again. That only made Lucien sigh. This kid had probably taken a sack of galleons from his vault at Gringotts and left without looking for anything else. "Don't worry, Harry. Do you really think your family, the Potters, wouldn't leave behind some books? Heirs don't just get money." Harry scratched his head. I didn't really look. There were a few books in Gringotts, behind a pile of galleons." Lucien muttered approval to himself. Indeed, the boy had taken the coins and gone. Harry, trying to be helpful, added, "If my family didn't leave any magic books, I have money. I'll buy books for you." Lucien raised a hand. "Say that again and I'll call it a loan. Those books are meant for you, the family's descendant. Intangible knowledge is far more valuable than money." Harry nodded, like an eager pupil, wholly convinced even if he didn't fully grasp why. "Lucien, what you say makes so much sense. I can't explain it, but it feels right." "You're a kind, warm-hearted person," Harry went on, lavishing praise on his new tutor, willing to help and only asking to borrow books. A true Ravenclaw. "No, Hufflepuff," Lucien teased, then amended. "Wait, no, someone like you should be in Gryffindor." Lucien listened to the endless compliments and the blazing loyalty in Harry's eyes and couldn't help but sigh. The Sorting Hat had made the right call putting this child in Gryffindor. "Stop," Lucien said. "Thank you." "Harry, have you thought about where we should hold the lessons and brew potions?" he asked. "I have," Harry replied without hesitation. "We can go to Hagrid's place." "Lucien, you remember Hagrid, the one who led us in the boats?" Harry asked. "Of course. Hard to forget," Lucien answered. Harry's suggestion actually tickled an idea in Lucien's mind. He needed a place to plant 10 Chinese chomping cabbages, a plot of land preferably out of the way and not drawing attention. Hagrid lived near the edge of the Forbidden Forest. If Hagrid would let him use a patch there, it would be convenient and secluded. Lucien knew Harry got along with Hagrid. If Harry persuaded him, it might work. He needed to start planting now. The chomping cabbage took 2 months to mature. If he wanted to shorten it to 1 month, he couldn't waste time. "Let's go," Lucien said, and began walking toward the Forbidden Forest, waving Harry along. "But I haven't got my potions equipment yet," Harry protested. Lucien pointed to several items hovering beside him, his cauldron and other tools he hadn't had time to put away after potions that morning. "Use mine." "Since you've chosen to learn from me," Lucien added as they walked, "know this. Learning means seizing every minute. If you don't race for it, someone else will." Harry followed Lucien with a bewildered expression, unaware that the tutor he had just chosen might change his life. 32. Hagrid's Hut, strictly Lucien. Lucien and Harry approached the gamekeeper's hut at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. From a distance, it looked like a small, ramshackle building thrown together without much care. Up close, though, Lucien realized the door alone must have been 4 or 5 meters high. He scanned the grounds and noticed a fenced vegetable garden nearby. Rows of plants filled the patch, and the pumpkins were enormous. So Hagrid already had a large plot, Lucien thought. If Hagrid agreed to let him set a corner aside for biting cabbages, it would save a great deal of trouble. The surrounding plants and the fence would provide cover, and he wouldn't have to worry about animals from the Forbidden Forest nibbling his crops. Although, if they were biting cabbages, it wasn't clear who would be doing the nibbling. Harry was just about to knock when a dog barked. Fang, a big black boarhound, shot out from the side of the hut and fixed them with a wary stare. "Fang, what is it? Someone near the forest?" A rough, booming voice called from inside. A few heavy footsteps thudded, and the door swung wide. Hagrid's broad, bearded face filled the opening. "Oh, it's Harry!" Hagrid beamed and waved his hand to hush Fang. "And who's this, then?" "This is Lucien Grafton. He's in Ravenclaw," Harry said. "He's my good friend," Harry added proudly. Lucien met Hagrid's grin and inclined his head. He shot Harry a surprised look. He hadn't expected to have already reached the status of good friend so quickly. "Ha-ha, is that so?" "Hello, Lucien," Hagrid said, rubbing his palms together. "Ravenclaw, eh? I'm sure you're a clever little wizard." He sounded pleased that Harry had made a companion and delighted that they'd come to visit him. "Come on in. Don't be afeard of Fang. He's a right softy, really." Lucien looked at Fang. The dog was broad and powerful looking, shoulders nearly at Lucien's chest, but his expression was more watchful than fierce. Then he looked up at Hagrid, who towered well over 3 meters. It occurred to him that Hagrid found most creatures cute. The inside of the hut matched Hagrid's reputation for living alone, cluttered, comfortable, and a little chaotic. Hagrid fished out 2 small stools and set them down, motioning for the boys to sit. "You've come at a good time. Me rock cakes just came out of the oven." He brought a baking tray forward. The cakes were small, with rough, lumpy tops and dotted with raisins. Steam still rose from them, and a faint, fruity smell hung in the air. Lucien reached out and touched one, then stopped. It was rock hard. He couldn't even pinch it. "Try one, see if you like 'em," Hagrid said expectantly. Lucien smiled politely. He had no intention of offending Hagrid, but his teeth would not thank him. Under the edge of his sleeve, he slid his wand out and cast a softening charm. The rock cake yielded to his teeth easily enough, and the dried fruit flavor was stronger than he'd expected. He ate it in small bites. Harry took one tentative nibble and then set his cake down, eyes wide as he watched Lucien. He seemed astonished. Lucien could almost read his thought. "He can actually eat that." Harry cleared his throat. "Hagrid, could we practice potions here? Me and Lucien want to learn." "Course you can," Hagrid said without hesitation. Very few people came to his hut. He'd assumed they wanted to have a bit of fun and was only too pleased to oblige. "Wait a minute, you'll need stuff." Before Harry could answer, Hagrid bustled off into the storeroom. Pots clattered and things tumbled. He reappeared with an astonishing pile, a basin-sized cauldron, a pestle as thick as an arm, vials, jars, and bundles of dried things. "This 'ere's a cauldron, that's a pestle, fluxweed juice, acromantula venom, a whooper feather." Lucien's hand went to his forehead when he saw the size of the equipment, but his expression changed completely as Hagrid pulled out ingredients: unicorn tail hair, ashwinder eggs, acromantula venom, ashwinder eggs, mandrake roots. Hagrid had a remarkable stock of rare and dangerous items, hardly the sign of someone who never left his grounds. Of course, Lucien thought, Hagrid loved magical creatures and knew the Forbidden Forest better than most. He must have collected many of these things himself. A new idea formed. Hagrid would surely know the ranges and haunts of many of the forest's inhabitants. If Lucien could persuade him to share that information, he could pinpoint where to take little Cheelin when it awakened. He could make one trip with Apparition later and have easy access to study the creatures, no wandering around at random needed. Lucien glanced at Harry, who was nervously rubbing his jaw. Tutoring this boy might have unexpected benefits. Harry lent him books, helped him make connections. He had to teach him properly, strictly, to be useful. Make the so-called savior live up to his name. "All right, Harry, full and hydrated, let's get started," Lucien said. Harry cast a longing look at his untouched rock cake and nodded. 15 grams of bright-eye crystal, you've weighed out 15.4, Lucien said as they prepared ingredients. Check the recipe, 100 milliliters of ashwinder egg white. You've mixed in yolk. The mandrake root should be cut to 1 centimeter. You've made it too short. Do it again. Under Lucien's watchful eye, Harry measured, chopped, and strained. Where Professor Snape could only glance and sneer while tending to a whole classroom, Lucien could watch every tiny motion. His voice was calm and even, but he corrected without mercy. Every tiny deviation had to be fixed. He sent Harry back to start over again and again until the mixtures and measurements were right. Harry perspired under the pressure. He felt as though he couldn't get anything quite right, and each repetition burned away a little more of his confidence. Yet under Lucien's scrutiny, the preparation was slowly perfected. At last, Harry had the ingredients ready and began to light the fire and heat the cauldron. During the brief pause, Harry opened his mouth, as if to ask why Lucien had been so lenient when they'd done herbology transplants, but so exacting now. Lucien didn't wait for the question. "You're wondering why I was gentler in herbology and harsher with potions," he said. Harry opened his mouth, then, seeing Lucien's serious face, could only nod awkwardly. "When we're classmates or friends, you can give advice and the other decides whether to follow it," Lucien continued. "Sometimes you can't be too harsh because you don't want to ruin a friendship. But here, I'm your tutor. You're paying me, and you trust me to teach you properly. I can't let you go away with careless or incorrect knowledge. That wouldn't help you, and it wouldn't be fair to the trust you've put in me. Because of the trust you've placed in me, I cannot tolerate teaching you incorrect or half-baked knowledge." Lucien's words hit Harry like a thunderclap. Before the wizarding world, Harry had lived with his aunt, the perpetual target of contempt and ridicule. After magic found him, he became the boy who lived, an object of curiosity and legend more than a person. More than once he had wanted to shout, "I'm Harry. I'm just Harry." He never expected anyone to honor his trust like that, to treat him with such respect. "Lucien, I'll study hard," he managed. "Thank you," Lucien said, patting Harry on the shoulder. "Don't overthink it for now. Just study." Harry nodded eagerly and set about adding the ingredients to the cauldron, following Lucien's instructions without hesitation. This time there was no confusion. He worked steadily, carefully. At last, a pot of faintly glowing, pale blue liquid finished refining. Lucien checked its color, fanned it to catch the scent, and gave a satisfied nod. "Try it. Your first potion." Harry's hands trembled a little as he spooned a measure into a small metal bottle, probably a single dose. He swallowed, then guzzled the Bright Eyes potion he'd brewed with his own hands. Lucien watched with mild amusement at the boy's intensity. Harry drank it with the eagerness of someone downing a favorite drink. A soft blue light shone for a moment in Harry's eyes, then faded. He took off his glasses, swept the room with an astonished look, and cried, "I can see clearly. The potion worked." "Thank you, Lucien. Thank you." Maybe it was the potion, maybe it was the spectacle of his removed glasses, but Harry's green eyes seemed even more vivid. Lucien felt a small swell of satisfaction. If anyone should have been able to help more than Lucien, it was Snape. A potion like Bright Eyes wasn't terribly difficult. Lucien was convinced Snape could have brewed a permanent cure for nearsightedness. If Snape didn't give Harry a bottle, perhaps he couldn't bear to remove the barrier of the glasses and look directly, afraid of thinking of her who could no longer open her eyes, of the woman who'd passed those eyes on to Harry. Whatever the reason, Lucien kept it to himself. "Well done, Harry. You're quite suited to potion making," Lucien said, offering praise and encouragement, exactly what a child Harry's age needed. Harry's face lit up. "It's because you teach so well, Lucien." Lucien inclined his head. "All right, I won't watch. Brew the Bright Eyes potion again yourself." Harry brightened and set about scrubbing the pot and preparing for another brew. Lucien strode over to the large basin-sized cauldron Hagrid had provided, and while gathering ingredients, murmured into the private channel in his mind to the system. "I want to borrow beginner-finished potions, daily loan, customized. 5 portions each of more fertilizer, weed clear spirit, and bug runaway potion, and 1 portion of cloak oil. 5 portions each of the first 3, and 1 portion of cloak oil," the system replied. Lucien figured fertilizer, herbicide, and insecticide would be useful in quantity, and Hagrid's cauldron was big enough for a single, efficient session. Items were issued to the system space, ready for retrieval. A task appeared. Successfully brew 5 portions each of more fertilizer, weed clear spirit, and bug runaway potion, and 1 portion of cloak oil. Lucien set to work. He'd already memorized the recipes for the 3 gardening potions and the cloak oil Snape had traded for. His movements were fast and exact. With precise wand work, he pre-processed several ingredients at once, then sent them flying into the giant cauldron to be combined. None of this would have been permitted in Snape's classroom, of course, but Lucien wasn't standing under Snape's glare here. Harry had only just finished his second Bright Eyes potion when Lucien had already completed brewing the 4 other types. Ding! The host had successfully brewed 5 kinds of potions. The improved potion recipe, weekly loan, had been repaid. Lucien let out a private breath of relief. Phew, good to be out of debt. He checked Harry's work, pointing out minor mistakes and how to correct them. The 2 of them finally had a bit of time to spare. Hagrid, who'd been watching with obvious interest, rubbed his hands together and couldn't help but exclaim, "You 2 can actually brew potions?" He'd half expected them to be playing at it, so seeing them take it seriously surprised him. Harry looked at Hagrid, puzzled for a moment by the old man's meaning. Lucien stepped forward and handed Hagrid 3 of the freshly brewed gardening potions. "Hagrid, these are fertilizer, herbicide, and insecticide. I saw you planting a lot of vegetables in the garden. You might find these useful," Lucien added. "Thank you for giving us the room and materials." Hagrid tried to refuse, waving his huge hands. No, Harry's my friend, and you're Harry's friend. I'm happy to help. Don't go giving me things." Lucien smiled. The half-giant was as straightforward and kind as he looked. Heh, Hagrid, I'm Harry's friend, and Harry's your friend, so you're my friend too. Is there anything wrong with helping a friend grow bigger, tastier vegetables? Chapter 34. Bite the kale is really hard, the person outside the window. When Lucien said, "Then you're my friend too," Hagrid was deeply moved. Aside from Harry, Lucien was the first young wizard to call Hagrid a friend outright. "Oh, you're right, Lucien. I was being sentimental," Hagrid admitted, blinking. "A friend shouldn't refuse a friend's kindness." Lucien handed the potion back. Hagrid took it with both hands, set it carefully inside a wooden cabinet, and even added a padlock to the door. Lucien felt unexpectedly pleased. Hagrid really did appreciate the gift. "These potions are fairly simple to make," Lucien offered. "If you'd like, I can brew more." Hagrid kept smiling and nodding. He didn't treat the potion like some trinket. He treated it as a gift from a friend. "Look, Lucien, I'll be frank. There is something I'd like your help with." "All right, no problem. What is it?" Hagrid answered before Lucien had finished the sentence, which caught Lucien off guard. He'd expected that with someone as blunt as Hagrid, it would be better to be direct, but why agree before hearing the request? Still, the easy warmth of a friend was pleasant. "I want to plant some things. Could you—" "I'll help you dig a plot in the vegetable garden," Hagrid cut in, enthusiastic. "What are you thinking of? Juicy tomatoes, crisp cucumbers, big pumpkins? You could give them to the house elves. They'll make all sorts of dishes. Pumpkin pasties are very, Hagrid chattered on, and Lucien found himself unable to get a word in. He hadn't expected the half-giant to be such a talker. Maybe Hagrid didn't have many people to talk to and was making up for it. Lucien only wanted to plant a few Chinese chomping cabbages, but Hagrid's gardening monologue had turned into a full recipe lecture. Ahem, Hagrid, I'll think about those later. Lucien interrupted. I want to plant some Chinese chomping cabbages. Is that all right? Lucien asked. Hagrid fell silent, stroked his huge beard, and smacked his lips. Lucien's stomach tightened. Did Hagrid dislike magical plants? Or did he think it too dangerous for a first year to try growing chompers and was about to refuse? If so, Lucien would have to find a secluded plot in the Forbidden Forest and figure out how to keep magical creatures from nicking the cabbages. That stuff's pretty tough and not very tasty, Hagrid said at last. What? Lucien blinked. Not tasty? He hadn't planned to eat them. They were for traps or a bit of mischief. If Hagrid thought they were tough, even he, who could chew rock cakes like biscuits, said they were tough, then they'd be perfect as a defensive plant. Even if they didn't bite hard, a big cabbage hitting someone would still make them think twice. Lucien explained he was more interested in magical plants than in eating them, and Hagrid relaxed. That's fine. I'll help keep an eye on them, Hagrid promised. Lucien noticed how natural the offer was and felt his cheeks warm with gratitude. There was still time, so Lucien took the chance to teach Harry how to brew an improved sleeping draught. He'd already traded the recipe to Snape. It would probably end up in textbooks sooner or later. Besides, Harry seemed to take to potions once Lucien explained things without Snape's sourness in the background. As Harry concentrated over the cauldron, Lucien told him, when administering a sleeping draught, you should use a stay-awake mask if you have one. If not, hold your breath when you go near the fumes. The version I'm teaching you is stronger, and, he added, showing the boy a simple spark charm to get a small fire going. Left to practice, Harry displayed an unexpected knack for potions. Lucien, satisfied, set off to the vegetable garden to sow the cabbage seeds. He'd meant to trade potions for seeds with Hagrid, but Hagrid simply waved a huge hand and handed them over. Helping a friend grow bigger cabbages needs no reward, he said. Lucien could only smile and take the seeds. After he left, Harry, eyes wide, said to Hagrid, Hagrid, here's the key. Could you please go to Gringotts for me and help me retrieve the magic books inside? The next morning, Ravenclaw first years had no early classes. Many slept in. Lucien, however, woke early and had come to the library to study. His shoulders ached a little from yesterday's work. He had meant to use magic to dig the beds, but after taking the title Diligent Little Gardener to heart, he wanted to try digging by hand. He'd been surprised to find that using a hoe felt even faster than magic. Once he'd picked up the tool, he seemed to have boundless energy and had plowed 2 extra rows. So that was the diligent part, he thought, half amused. Farming might suit him after all. Lucien read with that quiet intensity that made his emerald eyes lock on the page. He didn't notice the girl sitting a few tables away. Daphne Greengrass, long light blonde hair, her posture all correct breeding and composure. She watched him from under hooded lids, a book in her hands, and every time she tried to catch his eye, he remained absorbed in his reading. She remembered how he'd refused an invitation earlier and walked off as if it meant nothing. As the eldest Greengrass daughter, she wasn't used to being ignored. Irritation flared. Help! Help me! It's so high up here! A terrified shout cut through the library. Every head turned. Lucien looked up and saw someone clinging to the outside of the window opposite, a chubby, round-faced blonde boy dangling by his hands. Neville? Chapter 35, The Shock of the Silent Spell. Harry gets into trouble. Help! There was a ripping sound, the tearing of fabric, and Neville's shriek cut the air. Lucien drew his wand at once. A silent hover charm shot from its tip and struck Neville mid-fall. The chubby boy hung in the air for a heartbeat, then slowly and evenly descended to the ground. Lucien stood and walked to the window. From his vantage, he watched Neville land on all fours, then clamber to his feet and patted his robes. Lucien let out a quiet sigh. Good thing he'd reacted quickly. In moments like that, simple spells that could be cast silently and instantly were often the most effective. When every second counts, being a step faster can make all the difference. Madam Hooch, the flying instructor, hurried over to Neville. He was trembling, his face ashen, clearly still shaken, though he insisted he hadn't been hurt. Worrying nonetheless, Hooch bundled him off to the infirmary and instructed the other students to stop practicing and wait for her return. Lucien watched everything from his seat in the library. Madam Hooch might not have been swift enough with magic to prevent Neville's tumble, which would have annoyed a strict teacher, but she had been concerned enough to carry him herself. The rest of the incident would probably play out in the usual way. Harry and Malfoy would squabble about the Remembrall, McGonagall would notice Harry's skill at flying, and Gryffindor would crow about how their boy had excelled. Nothing out of the ordinary. Time to get back to studying. He picked up his book and resumed reading. The hover charm had been quick and quiet. Under normal circumstances, no one would notice. But there was one exception. A certain blonde-haired girl had been watching him intently. She had seen him draw his wand, seen him say nothing, and had seen Neville briefly suspended outside the window. Daphne's small mouth was slightly open, her eyes unfocused. She whispered to herself, barely audible. A silent spell? He didn't say the incantation. Isn't that advanced? I thought silent spells were only taught in 6th year. Lucien's in the same year as me. Her thoughts tumbled over one another. Born into the Greengrass family, one of the Sacred 28, Daphne had been around magic her whole life and understood it better than most of her peers. She had never heard of anyone so young managing a silent charm. That kind of technique demanded not only exquisite control but a reservoir of power most wizards hadn't the strength for. Lucien the same age as her, how could he have such raw capability? Pure blood? No, Grafton. I don't recognize that family name, she muttered, trying to place him. Is he from a reclusive line? Those are rare these days. Regardless, he's nothing like the flatterers I know. He's actually worthy of being my friend. Her eyes shone with a new enthusiasm, and she was about to rise and approach Lucien when a sharp, disapproving voice cut through the library. Young lady, this is a library for reading and study, Madam Pince snapped. It is not a place for idle talking. Please leave. Daphne's face flushed and went pale. She had been so absorbed that she'd forgotten the librarian's famous intolerance of noise. Before she could answer, Madam Pince had raised her feather duster. Daphne fled without argument, embarrassed and chastened. Madam Pince made no distinctions for noble blood or family rank. Anyone who disturbed the books or the study atmosphere would be shown the door. Lucien glanced up as the blonde figure hurried past, hair shining as she made for the exit. He watched her go. An odd little look of recognition crossed his mind, but an instant later a startling thump echoed across the grounds. Bang! The sound of someone hitting the ground, followed by high, pained cries and the sharp chatter of children, made Lucien set his book aside and look back out the window. The commotion had hardly died down since Neville's fall. Sighing, Lucien closed his book. Perhaps it wasn't the best day for library study. He should have checked the schedule. He decided not to join the cluster of students on the pitch. His studies came first. Besides, either Harry or Ron would come find him soon enough to retell the incident in full. Gryffindor boys rarely missed a chance to boast about any victory over Slytherin, however small. A few minutes earlier, at the flying class field, "Give me the Remembrall, Malfoy," Harry called. "No chance. I'll hide it and make Longbottom look for it," Malfoy replied, mounting his broom and zipping away. Harry chased after him. The two boys whirled across the sky, taunting each other until they paused midair. "You want it, Potter?" Malfoy sneered, and with a flourish he tossed the Remembrall toward Harry. Harry wanted to lung forward and grab it, but he was wary of being baited. He fumbled in his robe instead. One hand produced his wand, the other returned a small tin with a lid. He twisted it open to reveal a pale blue solid and a short wick, the sleeping draught Lucien had shown him how to make the day before. "It spreads fast, can knock someone out in 5 seconds. Light it with a scintilla spargo," he had been warned. "Scintilla spargo," Harry whispered, and a tiny spark ignited the wick. Holding his breath, he flicked the small tin at Malfoy. Malfoy, in turn, flung the Remembrall far away with a smirk. "If you want it, go get it yourself," he called. Harry streaked after the Remembrall. Malfoy, who had swooped to catch the thrown tin, didn't finish his taunt. His eyes suddenly closed. His hand slipped from the broom. He went rigid and plummeted toward the ground. Harry, still chasing the Remembrall, managed to catch it in front of a window and pulled off a clean turn. He had barely begun to relish his success when a sharp, agonized wail rang up from the pitch. It carried to where Professor McGonagall stood watching, and she immediately became grave. Harry's face drained of color as he realized the consequences of what had happened. Whether by his miscalculation or misfortune, the events on the pitch had caused more trouble than he'd intended. Quirrell's wool must be plucked, and Tom's wool must also be plucked. This is considered healthy. Defense against the dark arts. Lucien was sitting through his second lesson of the week, watching the stammering Professor Quirrell while thinking ahead to his plan for after class. He would corner Quirrell, but not in front of the class. Too many eyes, too many ears. The lesson was superficial as usual. A lecture on the origin and definition of Expelliarmus, and nothing about how to actually use it. Lucien grumbled silently. How could a professor teach like that? Quirrell, or rather, Tom. When the bell finally rang, Quirrell hurriedly gathered his notes and fled. Lucien followed. Quirrell pushed open the door to his office and was about to shut it when a hand blocked the frame. Professor Quirrell, I have some questions about defense against the dark arts. Lucien's voice was casual. Quirrell turned. Short, dark golden hair, a nervous frown, dark green eyes fixed on him. Sorry. The professor has something to do. Perhaps another time. He tried to close the door, but Lucien halted him with one sentence. Professor, I've been hearing rumors. They seem to concern your continued employment at Hogwarts. Quirrell's eyes flicked around, panic surfacing in the tremor of his voice. Lucien let a small smile tilt his mouth. It's hard to explain in a few words. He watched Quirrell scan the corridor, making sure no one was listening. All right, come in and tell me. The office was simple, almost barren. No stacks of textbooks, no alchemical apparatus, no potion ingredients. Lucien made a slow, appraising look around. No wonder, a man planning to run at the first sign of trouble wouldn't surround himself with things he'd have to leave behind. He took the seat opposite the desk. You can speak now, Professor. My name is Grafton, Lucien said. I have a fairly wide social circle. I hear what people say. Do you know how they're evaluating your teaching? Quirrell blinked. How do they evaluate me? Most of them say your lectures are too theoretical. Parents remember defense against the dark arts as being fun, practical. They expect their children to try lots of different magics. Lucien's tone was conversational, casual. A few of the Slytherin families, Greengrass the Malfoys, have complained, especially one of the Malfoys. He told me his father is a governor and might press for a change of professor unless things improve. Quirrell's face drained of color. Sweat beaded beneath the turban. He stumbled over his words. Lucien noticed the effect and felt a small, private satisfaction. He didn't actually know any Slytherins beyond vaguely remembering a Daphne Greengrass, but Quirrell's reaction was priceless. If he could be rattled by a few invented names, and if he'd offered his body to Lord Voldemort, he couldn't be as clever as he looked. If you're not going to teach defense properly, what will you do after you leave Hogwarts? Lucien asked suddenly, fixing Quirrell with a steady gaze. For a heartbeat, Quirrell seemed to empty, his eyes dull. Then he put a hand to his forehead, wiped at the sweat, and forced a smile that was too smooth to be genuine. Grafton, you are Ravenclaw. I believe you are a clever young wizard. His voice steadied, the stammer vanished. Defense against the dark arts deals with powerful magic, Quirrell went on. Is it not better for first years to build a solid theoretical foundation before they try practical application? Lucien folded his hands and nodded. That makes sense. Quirrell's smile widened as if to reward the assent. Your observation is sharp. I am simply more nervous when there are many people. In a quieter setting, I speak more clearly. Lucien smiled and under the desk touched his wand. So Tom had taken hold. The change was sudden and complete. The stammer gone, the manner smooth and confident. Before Quirrell could say more, Lucien produced his wand. I've been practicing practical defense, he said. Incendio, Defindo. He cast the spells cleanly and without flourish. Flames licked up from a discarded scrap of parchment, teaware skittered and shattered, and one of the office cabinets split neatly down the middle. Through it all, Lucien and Quirrell held each other's gaze. Lucien made no show of boasting. He was demonstrating a point. "Of course, those are minor tricks in front of you," Lucien added coolly. Then, with another precise wrist, he cast Reparo. The teacups glued themselves whole, the flames winked out, and the cabinet mended as if nothing had happened. It was important that Quirrell knew Lucien could make a scene in seconds, and that Lucien would be polite enough to clean up after it. "I wanted to discuss some practical combat techniques," Lucien said. Quirrell's smile was back, but it had an edge now. Someone had steadied his nerves and polished his tongue. "You are right. Most first years do not need practical combat so early. However, you seem exceptionally talented. If you wish, come to my office for extra lessons once or twice a week. I will teach you practical techniques myself." Lucien returned the smile, equally measured. "Thank you, Professor. I'd be honored." He had what he wanted. He'd risk a private arrangement with a professor who was clearly not entirely himself, and if the other occupant of that body was the one Lucien suspected, then he had to plan carefully. Lucien meant to consult Dumbledore about this later. He would not go in unprepared. Still, the opportunity was too good to refuse. Valuable knowledge, he thought, was worth a little risk. He rose, bowed slightly, and left the office. After the door closed, Quirrell straightened and spoke in a low voice to the turban as if addressing someone beneath it. "Master, those pure-blood students." A rasping, cold amusement answered him in Quirrell's mind. "Fool, do you think that boy came to blackmail us? To extract favors? He is a small snag. Teach him what you must." "He came prepared to intimidate," Quirrell protested. He showed some skill. He might notice something is wrong." The other voice was merciless. "Coward, I give you dark arts. Do you imagine that child has studied them? Does he possess uncommon aptitude for them? No, he will not recognize what you teach." "Very well." Quirrell's fingers tightened at his sides. "I will instruct him. I will use a variant of Imperio, subtle, gradual. After a few uses, his thoughts will bend without alerting the other professors." Silence and a slow, pleased smile Quirrell could not show on his face. The plan continued. Nothing else mattered. Noon, the Great Hall. You should have seen it. Malfoy was hanging in midair, and Harry made this sudden lunge and sent him flying. Ron, a chicken leg clutched in one hand, was waving the other for emphasis, adding color to Harry's heroics. A crowd had gathered along the Gryffindor table. They loved nothing more than a Slytherin's misfortune. Laughter and hoots punctuated Ron's tale. But Harry, the supposed hero, felt anything but triumphant. He knew he was in trouble. Malfoy had fallen and been hurt, and someone would want answers. Classes had ended, and still no teacher had found him. The waiting felt worse than whatever came next. Across the table, Lucien watched him. When Harry looked up, Lucien returned the gaze for a second before lowering his head again. Between Ron's dramatic retelling and Lucien's expression, Harry guessed Lucien had pieced the scene together. The scuffle over the Remembrall, the broomstick dispute, the fall. How badly was Malfoy hurt? Ron had joked that he'd broken every bone in his body, but falling from a great height couldn't be harmless. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall had arrived in time to stabilize him and send him to the hospital wing. Still, why did Harry feel so guilty? What had he actually done? "Harry, come with me. The headmaster wants to see you." Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the chatter, stern and decisive. The great hall quieted. She stood at the end of the Gryffindor table and motioned. Lucien watched Harry leave, expression unreadable. The headmaster's office was not a place to admire decor today, but something about the glass cabinet in the center drew Harry's attention despite himself. It was bright and conspicuous, and displayed inside it was a patched grayish-white hat. "Hey you, Harry Potter, do I look good like this now?" the hat said. Harry started. "You're the Sorting Hat?" he blurted. "Wasn't it gray-brown before?" "It was gray-brown once. It's just been a while since anyone cleaned me," the hat replied, sounding cross and amused at once. A cold voice cut off the odd conversation. "Potter, come and tell us how you managed to injure Draco Malfoy." Harry turned. Severus Snape was seated beside Headmaster Dumbledore at the desk, his dark eyes fixed on him with that intimidating intensity. Dumbledore, meanwhile, smiled and motioned for him to sit. "Heh, don't be frightened, Severus. Sit down and tell us plainly what happened." Harry swallowed and sat. A small tin can clinked onto the desk. Professor McGonagall had placed it there with a precise, crisp sound. The sight of it made Harry's stomach drop. It was the can for sleeping draught. He had looked for it on the Quidditch pitch earlier and not found it. "Is this your potion, Harry?" McGonagall asked, voice grave. She'd found the tin near where Malfoy had fallen. House ties meant nothing when someone might have misused magic that harmed a classmate. Harry's hands trembled on his knees. He nodded. Snape picked up the tin slowly. A faint scent of orchids drifted from it, familiar, but off somehow. He examined the residue, jaw tightening. The draught was a sleeping draught, but not a common one, an improved version. Snape's mind flicked to the memory of a formula Lucien had once shown him. In the castle at that moment, only Lucien and Snape should know how to brew this improved draught. The thought landed like a pebble in his mind, but he said nothing of it aloud. Sleeping draught, he told them, bland and clinical. Induces sleep in humans and can affect many magical creatures too. "Potter," Snape said then, voice cold. "What was this potion used for?" Harry's mind raced. He saw the scene again, himself with the can, the spark of a plan in a panic, Malfoy on his broom. He remembered Lucien's quiet instructions, his trust and respect, and he thought of protecting him. "I brewed it myself," he heard himself say suddenly. "I used it on Malfoy." Dumbledore and McGonagall blinked. Snape's face went dark. "I asked what it was used for," Snape snapped, "not whether you brewed it." Harry's throat tightened. He had panicked and made a poor choice in how he'd phrased it. I haven't been sleeping well since I came to Hogwarts," he stammered. "I made it to help me sleep. I didn't mean to hurt." He stopped, fighting to steady his voice. He really hadn't meant to injure anyone. He'd acted before he'd thought. Snape's expression didn't soften, but he didn't escalate the accusation either. "Potter misused a potion, resulting in accidental injury to a classmate," he said flatly. "The punishment will be as follows. Copy the school rules 10 times, and you will volunteer in the hospital wing for 1 hour each day for 1 week. Gryffindor will lose 50 points. Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged a look of surprise. Snape's punishment was firm but not harsh. His wording, calling it an accident, was a clear mitigation. McGonagall's brows knit. She didn't understand why Snape had been so temperate. Dumbledore took on the kindly seriousness he used with students. "I agree, but there is one more thing, Harry. You must apologize to the injured student sincerely. I understand the cause of your conflict," he added, "but what you did was wrong, and Malfoy has been hurt. You are classmates, not enemies. There should be no hatred." Harry nodded, heavy with relief and dread at once. "I know I was wrong. I accept the punishment." After a few more formalities, Harry left the headmaster's office. Once out in the corridor, he straightened his shoulders. Harry Potter would not betray a friend. Harry Potter would not betray a friend. 38. Transfiguration Class. Inside the headmaster's office, after Harry had left, Professor McGonagall stood to go. She still had to prepare for the afternoon's Transfiguration class. As Snape moved to leave, Dumbledore called after him. "Severus, what's your impression of Lucien Grafton? He should have been in your class by now." Snape's shoulders stiffened for a moment, then he composed himself and answered evenly. "Quite talented in potions, and, well, very humble." Dining hall. There was still time before class. Lucien sat at a long table with some Slytherin classmates when someone with sharp eyes called out, "Oh, look, Harry's back." Harry strode in with his head high and chest out, walking with the confident gait of someone who'd just returned from a triumph. Didn't he have to attend a disciplinary meeting? Why did he look so pleased with himself, as if he'd been given a prize? "Harry, are you all right? What did the professor say?" Someone asked anxiously. Harry recounted the punishment in detail, including the 50 points docked from Gryffindor, enough to wipe out the progress they'd made over the last few days. For a beat there was silence, then a burst of noise. "Oh yeah, we won! Gryffindor beat Slytherin again. The professor even punished him. Recognition!" A group of older Gryffindors erupted into cheers. The first years looked confused. The other houses who had lingered to watch the drama weren't surprised. They knew how Gryffindor celebrated its victories. The Slytherins, expecting a spectacle, snorted and drifted away. Lucien watched the scene, then understood the thinking. To the Lions, Harry getting the better of Malfoy was as good as Gryffindor getting one over Slytherin. The professor's punishment could even be read as official acknowledgement. Lucien shook his head. The rivalry between the houses was less about points and more about one-upmanship. No wonder the Weasley twins hoisted Harry up like some brand new champion. Afternoon. Lucien arrived for Transfiguration and spotted the podium, a tabby cat with markings like spectacles on its face. He nodded slightly at the feline. Professor McGonagall had a habit of showing off Transfiguration's possibilities this way, and took his seat among the Slytherins. No one rushed up to pet the cat. That was usually the province of animal-loving Hufflepuffs or show-off Gryffindors trying to get a reaction before the first class. When the bell rang, the tabby leaped down and with a shimmer became Professor McGonagall in deep green robes. A collective gasp went through the room. "Lucien, look! What kind of magic is that? It's amazing!" Terry whispered, wide-eyed beside him. "Animagus," Lucien said casually. "A wizard who can transform himself into an animal. It's one of the highest skills in Transfiguration." He explained quietly that Animagus belonged to human transfiguration. The caster retained their magic after transforming, but it could not involve turning into a magical creature, which was forbidden. Usually an Animagus could assume only one animal form. McGonagall's voice cut through the murmur. "Transfiguration is a profound and dangerous subject. You will be working with it often in the future. Study this with rigor and seriousness. Anyone who dares to make trouble in my class will be immediately asked to leave." Her sternness made the students sit up straight. Then, with a brief smile, she added, "Of course, Transfiguration can also be a great deal of fun," and tapped the podium. It turned instantly into a plump pig that flapped its ears and snuffled. The students' eyes lit up at the charm of it. Just then, the classroom door opened. "Sorry, Professor, we just came from the hospital wing." A pale boy with a bandage around his head and his right hand and left leg in plaster hobbled in on crutches, supported by two tall, sturdy boys. "Malfoy, you don't need to rush to class. You should be resting," McGonagall said, frowning. Snape had informed her earlier that Malfoy was to be excused to recover. Malfoy lifted his chin. "Professor, Harry Potter was volunteering in the hospital wing and was taking care of me. He also gave me a sincere, humble, heartfelt apology. I'm fine. I can be in class." Lucien stared. Bandages and casts. And yet Malfoy spoke as if his injuries were merely props in a show designed to highlight Harry's kindness. An apology that was sincere, humble, heartfelt. Was this a reading comprehension exercise? Lucien suppressed a smile, and for a moment, remembered Dumbledore's old words. Love was indeed a powerful magic. McGonagall had the three Malfoys sit and resumed the lesson. After explaining basic theory, she set the students to practice. The assignment was simple on paper. Turn a matchstick into a needle. Basic inanimate to inanimate transfiguration. The curriculum would later advance to inanimate to animate, animate to inanimate, and finally animate to animate, which required suppressing the consciousness of living things and grew exponentially more difficult. But even this first exercise flummoxed many of the students. Terry kept poking his match with his wand until it merely turned silver. At least it looked like a needle. Malfoy, forcing his non-dominant hand to work, made the match glow and give off heat, which meant he had to move on to another match. A few students had small changes. Most of the matches remained stubbornly unchanged. Lucien raised his wand, tapped his match once. A faint glow ran along it, and a well-proportioned silver needle took its place. He tapped again, and the needle's surface hollowed, tracing a lattice of intricate patterns like a miniature work of art. Not satisfied with mere ornament, Lucien followed his intuition. Inanimate to inanimate, transfiguration ran two ways, changing properties toward explosive ends, or transforming into complex mechanical structures that showed fine control. He constructed the image in his mind and let the magic flow through his wand, shaping the silver. Seconds later, the needle had become a tiny monocular telescope. Gears clicked and whirred as the instrument extended and retracted on its own. Lucien reached out to test it, to see if it truly worked rather than being a simple imitation, when a chime sounded from nowhere. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering a loan. A small, mechanical voice continued, as if from inside the telescope itself. Loan name, Mechanical Transfiguration Pocket Watch. Rating, except for the inability to tell time, all other functions are complete. 39. a fusion of transfiguration and alchemy loan, mechanical transfiguration pocket watch, monthly loan. Repayment deadline, 30 days. Loan content, mechanical transfiguration pocket watch, a creation fusing transfiguration and alchemy. It can record the transfiguration spells one has mastered, transforming them into semi-permanent solidified transfigurations. Note, this is not a weapon, but a teaching tool. By analyzing its structural principles, one can deepen their understanding of transfiguration and alchemy. Loan task. Create a controllable mechanical animal or master semi-permanent solidified transfiguration. Choose one. Lucien Grafton read the loan description that had popped up from the system. He hadn't expected that even interacting with his own magical creations could trigger one of those loans. Mechanical Transfiguration Pocket Watch. Just the name sounded intriguing. Semi-permanent solidified transfiguration was mentioned in the textbooks as one of the pinnacles of the art. Ordinary transfigurations weren't permanent. Professor McGonagall's classroom demonstration, turning a desk into a pig, only held as long as magic was being maintained. Semi-permanent solidified transfiguration was the result of long, precise work to fix a transfiguration as stably as possible. It still required periodic replenishment of magic, but that upkeep didn't demand mastery of the original high-level spell. Even a newly awakened witch or wizard could top it up. Lucien's thoughts drifted to something else he needed to acquire this year, the Philosopher's Stone. Its elixir of life was remarkable, but the ability to transmute base metals into true gold interested him even more at that moment. Turning matter into gold permanently, no ongoing magic required, lasting for centuries, wasn't pure alchemy nor pure transfiguration, but a blend of both. No wonder the pocket watch was described as a fusion of the two disciplines. It wasn't a weapon, it was a teaching tool. Study its structure and learn. Brilliant, and the loan's task giving two options made sense now. It covered both transfiguration and alchemy. With his SSS grade transfiguration talent, mastering semi-permanent solidified transfiguration in a month would be straightforward. He'd also been rated A+ in alchemy. It would be a waste not to learn more. Lucien smiled. Why pick one when he could try both? System, I want to take this loan. Ding. Loan application successful. Item has been issued to system space and can be checked at any time. He pocketed the message and returned his attention to the miniature telescope he'd transfigured. The craftsmanship was delicate, a tiny lattice of gears and lenses that somehow retained the look of a machine even though it had been conjured from a simple object. He trained the lens on the window and adjusted the focus. Through the little telescope, he could just make out Hagrid's hut. He nudged it a little to the side and found the vegetable patch. The biting cabbage seeds had sprouted already. Not bad. Not bad at all. Lucien was so absorbed in watching his cabbages that he didn't notice Professor McGonagall watching him from the front of the classroom, her expression unreadable. Then her voice cut across the room. Lucien, your work still exceeds my expectations. He hurriedly set the telescope down. Thank you, Professor. I'm aware this basic transfiguration isn't difficult for you. Transfiguring patterns on a silver needle wouldn't be a challenge either. Her eyes flicked to the piece in his hands. May I borrow that, please? He handed it over. She examined it carefully, turning it over and peering through the tiny lens. Confirming that it was functional and not mere ornament, she murmured, Perhaps the pace of the class isn't suitable for you. Professor? Lucien hadn't heard the soft aside. She caught herself and smiled. No, nothing. Lucien, come to my office after class. Understood, Professor. For a moment the room settled, and then McGonagall's voice rang out toward the house points board. Grafton is the first to complete the transfiguration. Ravenclaw, 20 points. 20 points? The whole class erupted into bewildered murmurs. Teachers usually awarded 2 or 3 points, perhaps 5 for exceptional work. 20 points at once was unheard of. A Slytherin, Flint, frowned and called out, Professor, why does completing the match-to-needle task get 20 points? He held the nearly needle-shaped object in his hand, sure he'd been on the verge of finishing and earning points for Slytherin. To have a Ravenclaw leap ahead like that, and with 20 points, felt like a mistake. Oh, Mr. Flint, I must correct something. Professor McGonagall raised the telescope he'd handed her so the whole class could see it. Grafton didn't complete the match-to-needle transfiguration. He completed this. The students looked from their own half-finished needles to the intricate miniature telescope, and the room went silent. Several of them edged closer, curiosity overriding hesitation. "May I see it?" One of the girls in the front raised her hand. "You'll have to ask our classmate Lucien," McGonagall said, smiling. Lucien nodded and stepped forward. A few students came up to inspect the tiny device. Then more followed, voices full of astonished admiration. The workmanship, the miniature gears, the articulated focus ring, was far beyond what anyone had expected could come from the lesson's simple exercise. Someone tugged at Lucien's sleeve. "Lucien, can you teach me transfiguration?" A younger student asked hopefully. Lucien met the earnest face, and watching the others crowding around his little telescope with bright eyes, felt the familiar warmth that came from sharing his knowledge. "Lucien, can you teach me transfiguration?" Someone had tugged his sleeve. Lucien turned and saw Daphne sitting a little behind him, her golden hair falling over her shoulder. She was holding a curious object, half a needle on the left, half a match on the right, and smiling up at him. Most half-and-half transfigurations he'd seen were split top to bottom. A left-right division like that was unusual. She had talent. If he could teach them clearly, that would show his own understanding was rock solid. He tilted his head. "Let me ask you something first," he said. "Why turn a match into a needle instead of turning a needle into a match?" The question made Daphne pause, and made Terry, leaning nearby, think too. Word spread quickly over the first few days. Lucien was a top student. Learning from him was the smart move. Because matches are cheap, and one box would be enough for the whole class?" Terry offered, scratching his head as both Lucien and Daphne looked at him expectantly. "Heh, I want to learn too. My match can only change color so far." "No problem," Lucien said. He took a breath and explained. Transfiguration, when you're changing inanimate objects into other inanimate objects or into living things, has an important point. You should be thinking about the characteristics of the thing you want to become. You don't have to keep picturing the original object. For example, if your goal is a needle, it doesn't matter much whether you start with a burning match or a chunk of chalk. His explanation clicked for both of them. Daphne asked, "So you mean we should picture becoming a needle, not be stuck on turning a match into a needle?" Lucien smiled and nodded. The question-led teaching made them think actively. Their understanding would be deeper. He made a silent note to use the same approach when tutoring Harry in potions. He'd be borrowing books from his family, after all, and needed to teach well. He even wondered what kind of magical knowledge the Potters might have bequeathed. If the family had ever developed something as mundane and lucrative as a shampoo monopolizing the wizarding market, it would probably involve potions and herbology. He returned to the lesson. If you keep thinking in terms of transforming the match into the needle, the features of both the match and the needle will keep popping into your head. At our age, our control isn't fine enough yet. When your thoughts are muddled, the result will show a confused mix of both objects' characteristics. Daphne hesitated, then thought of the silent spells Lucien had performed in the library that morning. He had made an impression on her. She wondered if his warning about first years excluded him. Lucien continued, letting his curiosity from a previous life slip in. A needle is simple, hard, sharp, and made entirely of metal. A match has a wooden stick and a flammable chemical head. Think of it as an alchemical material. Changing into a match requires altering some properties. That's not something first years usually take on. Terry listened with a grin. Daphne's expression grew deeper. If property changes and complicated mechanical transformations were beyond first years, then what about the things she'd seen Lucien do? She had watched him transform a match into a needle and then into a telescope. The mechanical change had rattled her. That memory must be why she'd finally summoned the courage to ask him for instruction. "All right," Lucien said. "Now that you've heard the theory, let's practice." Terry was already eager to try, but Daphne stared at him for a beat longer, lost in thought. Lucien caught her looking and felt an amused warmth. "Why are you still looking at me? Is there a spell written on my face? Pick up your wand and practice." Heat rose to Daphne's cheeks. She bent her head and picked up her wand. Her hair fell over her flushed ears. Lucien let out a small laugh. It felt good to be a teacher. He recognized, with new appreciation, the old admonitions he'd heard back in school. "What are you looking at me for? Pick up your pen and write." It was satisfying to nudge students into action. Under his guidance, Daphne and Terry improved steadily. Nearby, Malfoy, who'd intended to squeeze over to see the telescope, had restrained himself because of the cane at his side. Staying back, he'd caught fragments of Lucien's explanations and experienced a breakthrough of his own. His transfiguration progressed rapidly. Lucien was extraordinary. Malfoy thought a Malfoy heir should make friends like him. He tightened his grip on the cane, already plotting to speak with Lucien after class. When the bell rang, Lucien left the Transfiguration classroom, planning to wait near Professor McGonagall's office. He had barely rounded a corner when someone called after him. "Lucien, are you going to the Black Lake this weekend? An upperclassman said it's fun there." Daphne was smiling hopefully. Fun felt like a foreign word in his schedule. Little Cheelin would be waking up by the weekend. He wanted to begin his exploration of the Forbidden Forest to catalog magical creatures. He had potions to practice, spells to study, the new Transfiguration pocket watch to investigate, cabbages to plant, and Harry to tutor. He would also be borrowing family books to prepare the potions lessons. "Thank you for the invitation," he said politely. "I'd like to, but I'm busy this weekend." Her smile faltered. "We just started school. What could you possibly be so busy with? You're not planning to spend the whole weekend in the library, are you?" Lucien considered his list and felt an odd satisfaction at how full things already were. "Actually, I was in the library this morning," he said, noticing a detail. "Were you there too?"